Good afternoon, everyone. This is John Rust on Rust on the Radio on Freedom 95, 950 AM and 95.9 FM on your radio dial, the right station for talk all across beautiful Indiana. So, folks, today we have a special gaggle of guests in the studio today. I have Ken Colbert. I'm going to let him introduce members of the Indiana Freedom Caucus. Welcome, Ken.
Well, welcome. Thank you. Ken Colbert down in Evansville, and we have our group here from the Indiana Freedom Caucus out of Evansville. We have our actual president of our organization, Mr. Brian Pease. We have our secretary, Donna Fagley. We have Cheryl Badiger Smith.
Welcome, Cheryl.
And we have John Sissel.
Welcome, John.
Thank you.
Who is a beekeeper and chicken farmer, as I understand.
Yes, I am.
So, folks, that's dear to my heart, being a chicken farmer myself. Also in the studio is Adrian Marietta. Welcome,
Aiden
Adrian.
Marietta, one of the co-hosts of the Neurologic podcast, along with my co-host,
Justin George.
So, folks, guess what? There are all kinds of podcasters in on this show today, so it will be interesting. But we all deeply love Indiana. We all deeply care about what happens to our state. I can say this safely. I think we all care deeply that we get politicians who actually act on the words they say. One thing I've noticed, I've went to a lot of Lincoln Day dinners when I was running for the U.S. Senate in 2024 and 2023. And I had a lot of politicians that almost exclusively, they all came and thumped their chest on how conservative they are. But it didn't match their votes in Washington, D.C. or here in Indiana. So it's kind of like dinner theater. You go to a Lincoln Day dinner and you hear, oh, I'm conservative. I'm a true blue conservative. I'm a ruby red conservative. But it just doesn't match the voting record. And I think Ken and these folks will agree there's something happening in the state of Indiana. You know, we're kind of becoming more and more like California. You know, folks, we have the fourth highest gasoline tax in the country in the state of Indiana, yet our Indiana GOP supermajority just pushed through a law to make all Indiana roads eligible to be tolled. What's up with that? Did you know that Indiana has the second highest sales tax in the country? That's crazy. Why are we right behind California in sales taxes? We are a ruby red state.
Well, I think so, too. I think about my representative down in Evansville. We have Vanetta Becker, who has been in that position for 44 years. And consistently, if you look at the history, 71% of the time she votes with Democrat initiatives, even though she is a Republican. And so there seems to be a lot of this vernacular is rhino, Republican in name only. And you see consistently about how our elected officials, under the guise of being conservative and Republican, how they're actually voting. I know during the redistricting, I was one of the speakers. Brian Pease was as well. And we were in support of redistricting the state of Indiana. And my representative, Vanetta Becker, would not meet with us. We were literally requesting to meet with her in person as we were up there, and she was not available. So what we're finding is there seems to be a coalition of Republicans now in the state of Indiana that are no longer listening to their conservative constituents, where in fact perhaps they're receiving their instructions either from political donors or special interest or an agenda, perhaps through AIM. I've been watching closely about the Accelerated Indiana Municipalities, and that's one of the lobbying groups in the state of Indiana. So consistently, we're finding that there is this issue where our Republican representatives are not listening to the people at this point.
And President Trump has stepped forward to endorse candidates challenging the state senators in the Indiana State House who voted against redistricting.
Mm-hmm. All 21 of them, actually. Mm-hmm. And mine is one of them as well down in Evansville with Vanetta Becker.
You know, my thoughts on redistricting, I think they were protecting Andre Carson. I think they were protecting Frank Mervan. It's all about just protecting the establishment. You know, what got my attention on Andre Carson is we could have taken him out easily.
So easily, yes.
So easily. There are more than enough conservative Republican voters. If you look at the maps that were proposed, they all would have been safely Republican seats to be held.
Well, interestingly, we started looking at these 21 Republicans and why they voted against redistricting, and there was a commonality. Every one of them were receiving substantial donations from Eli Lilly, specifically. And so there was a reason why these people decided to vote against the best interest of their constituents.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to say follow the money. Follow the money, because
Right.
that's what's going on. There was no doubt we could have gotten it done, and we could have, like you said, gotten Andre out of there. But their pockets wouldn't have been lined with the cash if they had done that. So Indiana Freedom Caucus endorsing people that's running against these rhinos.
And I think from a party standpoint, I think behind the scenes, I'll be blunt, I think they're looking at a really bad year for Republicans this fall. You know, if you look at what's going to happen in the House this fall, perhaps all the polls show Democrats regaining the House, unfortunately. And so I think they were looking at, well, maybe we do have to protect our 7 of 9 against any possible defeat by not diluting their base. But, folks, on average, it's about a 20-point gain for Republicans over their Democrats. And I don't think we're going to be like that in Indiana. So I don't think Indiana would have had a Democratic wave at all. You know, we are a ruby red state.
But what it's done, though, is disenfranchising true conservative Republicans, because our voice is being stifled because of what these individuals within the Republican leadership at the state of Indiana. They're not listening to Hoosiers at this point. It's special interest. As an example, I keep going back to my particular representative, Vanetta Becker. We know how she votes. We know that she's not voting on behalf of the conservatism, even though she projects herself as being under the Republican Party.
These individuals who voted against in the Senate, the redistricting, the majority of them do not respond to their constituents. This is a pattern throughout the state. They don't reply. You email. You send correspondence. You call their political assistants. You try to reach them, and they will not acknowledge that they've received your information. They will
What
not
happened to
respond.
town halls in Indiana? They've disappeared.
Well, it's turned into a
Victoria Sparks,
circus.
in her defense, she actually does some town halls.
She does, and she takes criticism, which elected officials should be subjected to that. I know in Cheryl and I's situation, we were thrown out of the Republican Party as Republicans in bad standing because of the criticism of our elected official, which under the First Amendment, I have the right, we have the right to be as critical. They may not like what we have to say. And that's what happened in Vanderburgh County, without getting into all my particular situation, but being thrown out of the Republican Party because of the criticism of my elected officials. I have a right to do that. I won my elections, but I was disenfranchised. Thousands of my voters that supported me, I was thrown out of the party because I was critical of my elected officials.
You know, doesn't that sound like something you'd hear in North Korea or Cuba or Russia?
It is.
Yes.
You know, I want to say this, too, because I'm kind of fired up about this again. There is no due process within the Republican rules. There is no due process. There is no appeal process. What they say is the verdict, even though they're violating your constitutional rights. And it's not, there's no justification. What we're finding is this designation of Republican in bad standing is prevalent now over the state.
It's rampant.
It's rampant.
It's
all
rampant,
over the
and it's
state.
being used as a sledgehammer over all Hoosiers for if they want to run for office themselves. You're being told, well, don't you dare say one bad thing about any one of our
Yeah, but the
people in the
hypocrisy
club.
is there, though.
It's selective. It's selective because it's not the same standard for everybody.
Well,
They make
and it's
exceptions.
different county by county because it really depends on your county chairman, right?
Well, our county chairman acts like nothing's in his hands, and that's a blatant lie right there.
Right, we know the rules. We know the platform.
Yeah.
We know how to navigate all of that. But we are finding across the state, there's a more recent example that's transpired too, where somebody else got thrown out of the party because of alleged rule violations. But the hypocrisy, we can cite many examples where things have occurred within the Republican Party, and they're not addressing it. They're giving free passes. We could even talk within Braun's administration, a specific person.
So
county-
is there a list of all the Republican rules?
Yes, but it changes. Well, even Brian can tell you that. He looks them up all the time.
I try to keep up with the revisions. They do not have a mechanism in place within the rules, or at least how they existed the last time they revised them. And they revised them by fiat, by the Central Committee at the state level. But they do not make an in-text note that this section has been changed as of this date or show the previous verbiage. At their whim, they arbitrarily change it, and there's no delegate caucus.
It's
Well, and you're
non-existent.
paying for it. As taxpayers, we pay for the elections. It's not the Republican or Democratic Party in the state of Indiana that pays for the elections. It's the taxpayers.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, think about this, too, because the rules have to be approved by the delegation. This is why you have the convention. You go through that process, you determine the platform, etc. And right now, the current leadership, from my perspective, where the Republican Party has gone rogue. They're arbitrarily changing rules at a whim to disenfranchise not only candidates, but the objective of what Hoosiers should expect from their leadership of conservatism. In my perspective, again, I think the Republican Party in the state of Indiana has been hijacked, just like it has been with the Democrat Party. They have gone rogue with their ideologies. I see the same thing within the Republican Party and the leadership. Think about how frequently they've been changing the organization. They have people stepping down. They have, like right now, Lana Kiesling is in that position. She's an individual that will not return the call. Okay, I'm still a conservative. I still follow the platform. When I do call them out, when they're deviating from it, then you become this Republican in bad standing, because how dare you question about what the position of the Republican Party is navigating toward?
Well, like I said, there's 2 tiers. Okay, so in our local area, we have our county chair who's married to the county prosecutor. If that's not enough conflict, the prosecutor hires a Democrat to be her right-hand man.
The deputy. Stan
deputy.
Levko is
And
his
so
name.
tell me why that's not a Republican in bad standing, Brett.
And folks, what I'm talking about is how the state or the county chairs can throw you off the ballot for any reason if you hadn't met a 2 primary rule. And that's how they got me, even though I have only ever given money to the Republican Party my entire life. Never $1 to the Democrat Party, ever.
The county chair can give a waiver, though.
They
They
can
did
give
that in Evansville. They had a Democrat they gave a waiver to run on the Republican ballot. Her name is Catterberry. She's our county commissioner right now in Vanderburgh County.
But that is subject to that each individual's county chair on how they interpret what will be a Republican or not.
Or manipulate. That's the word that comes to mind.
The issue I have on the 2 primary rule, there's a lot of people like me. I was a chicken farmer for, 40 years. I wasn't that involved in politics other than writing checks to Republicans. I was busy being an egg farmer. And then when I decided to run for office, they're like, oh, we found this little loophole. You're not going to be able to run this year. So they kicked me off. That was it.
They weaponize it.
Well, they pick and choose. They were scared of me because they know I can't be bought off by Eli Lilly or AES. And I want to talk about that in the next segment, folks. We have a big problem in the state of Indiana, and I know Ken has some really excellent points to make on that, where one of our biggest utilities, AES, folks, is being bought by BlackRock. This is John Rust on Rust on the Radio. We will be right back. Welcome back, folks. This is John Rust on the Radio, the John Rust Show on Freedom 95, broadcasting at 95.9 FM and 950 AM on your radio dial all across the beautiful fruited plain, as Rush Limbaugh used to say, of our great state of Indiana. Gosh, I always say this about every show, how much I miss Rush Limbaugh.
Yeah.
My family, we have farms in 7 states, and I did a lot of driving for 30-some years going across our beautiful country, and I would always listen to Rush Limbaugh. He made that time a educational tool for me, and he talked about that. He believed he was educating his listeners, and that one of the reasons I'm doing this show, and I think it's one of the reasons Ken Colbert is doing what he's doing, because it's not about you, it's not about me.
Right.
It's about what's right for Indiana.
Absolutely.
It's about what's right for Hoosier taxpayers. I like to think back, when I was growing up in the 1970s, my circle of friends was who I rode my bicycle, or I could ride my bicycle to distance-wise. Today it's a different world. And the world is being pushed on us, and we will get into data centers a little bit later. We have this change being pushed on us, and I think a lot of Hoosiers are standing up and saying, no, wait a second. What Indiana has is wonderful as it is. Why on earth do we want to become subjects to these tech oligarchs? The data centers, that's my opinion on it. Why do we want to have these 7 trillionaires control every aspect of our life? You know, there's 2 egg farmers at the table here in this radio show. You know, there's nothing stopping you from going out and having a chicken farm and competing against my family. That's what free market capitalism is all about. That keeps me honest. That keeps you honest. The problem is we have these giant trillion-dollar corporations now who are controlling everything and profiting from everything. But what makes me very upset about all this is you, the Hoosier taxpayer, are the ones having to subsidize it through much higher electricity prices, through property taxes that are being pushed up oftentimes by local politicians pushing these data centers because it's a way to get property taxes up. You know, I have a contrarian view on that. I think government should be shrinking. I don't think local government should be sitting there worried about, oh, how can we make ourselves bigger? You know, for instance, Monroe County right now is putting in a over $200 million jail that they just built a new one only 35 years ago. In my opinion, 35 years for a building is pretty new. But they are putting in $220 million in Monroe County for a new jail.
Are they going to own it, though? What we're finding is across the state, we know of 2 counties right now that they've set up what's called building corporations. So this gives them the ability to tax the taxpayers when the taxpayers don't even own the real estate. So I'm just really curious about what's happening in Monroe County right now.
You know, there's no such thing as a free lunch, folks.
But the thing is, they're using taxpayer money.
Well, I look at things as a simple farmer. You know, why on earth do you need a new jail if the jail you have today is working? You know, what they're saying is it doesn't have a media room or something like that, that some judge somewhere says that they have to have a media room. And so they're using that as the excuse to build a $220 million jail. Always follow the money, absolutely. You know, one of my pet peeves are roundabouts. Yeah, they're great in theory, but a roundabout can cost $2 million. 4 stop signs is $800.
And stop signs, in my opinion, are a lot safer. In my experience as a driver,
Well, it's just in my family's business, I always look at things on what the dollars cost. And so when a career politician at a county level somewhere is saying, oh, if we put in that $2 million roundabout, I'm sorry to say this, but behind the scenes, someone's getting a kickback on that.
Absolutely. But you think about...
And there's going to be a lot more of a kickback from a $2 million roundabout than there will be from $800 in stop signs. I'm negative on roundabouts. A friend of my mom's was in a terrible accident in a roundabout because she went into the roundabout correctly and someone T-boned her, not knowing how to handle it.
Mm-hmm. Was that an illegal alien where one of the driving cards were issued?
Most likely, yes.
wouldn't shock me.
Right.
But welcome to Indiana, where Indiana driver's licenses exams are given in 13 different languages.
Yes.
Punjabi, Chinese, Arabic. We're in a ruby red state.
And yet the signs are in English. Maybe
right.
we ought to test them on their comprehension of the English language.
Exactly. That's the big issue that no one's talking about. You hit the nail on the head. The signs are in English. They're not in Arabic. Are we going to have to change all of our signs now to have 13 different languages? Heck no.
Well, you have to watch our legislators because they may try to sneak in some of these laws in regards to... Think about when Mark Mesmer, I'm going to mention his name, he was one of them when he was in the state of Indiana, brought forward driving cards, not driving license. Again, they play with words. It did not get passed at the time. But here we are now having all these people driving in the state of Indiana that are not U.S. citizens, temporary protected status, and the state of Indiana has decided to provide them driving up privileges within our state.
Right, and Haitian Creole is one of the languages, folks, you can take an Indiana driver's exam in, is Haitian Creole. And Ken, I know you talked about that. Look at what percentage Evansville is now of Haitians.
We understand it's about 10,000 is what we're
more.
seeing.
I think more. And I'm in insurance, so I can tell you right now there's a lot of hit and run. They leave the scene of the accident. I personally know a girl that was hit. Long story short, they called the police, told them to pull over. She told this person to pull over, which they don't understand. Anyway, the person that was at fault left the scene, Haitian. She wasn't the owner of the car. So all of that said, they finally found out who was the owner. This girl was supposed to go to court. She never showed up. Then they moved. So then the person that was not at fault has to pay out under her insurance. So, and it goes on all the time. But you're talking about all the different taxes and so forth. We just found out on the way here that our city government just has said that they passed a law in the city that your dog, your cat, or your ferret has to be chipped. Okay, so I'm sorry, that would be my decision as if for my animal, not their decision. But there was never discussion, talked about it beforehand, and so now that's another price they want to put on
So,
people.
folks, I'm sitting here wondering how I'm going to chip my 22 million chickens.
That's going to be a lot of work. I was thinking, when I heard that bill, I said, now, do I got to chip all my chickens?
But the
Well,
likeness that life's
and
being
I will
ruined on the
step on.
roads.
I'm going to step on some toes here, and I may get myself in trouble, but I don't care. I always speak the truth and shame the devil. The issue on the Haitian immigrants, if you recall, that was due to a horrific earthquake in Haiti back in 2011.
I believe that was when it happened.
Okay, so they're here on temporary protected status. I am all about helping our fellow mankind, but that doesn't mean that you get to be supported by our welfare program forever. That's totally different. You have to be contributing to society. You have to be paying taxes.
But that's what the IEDC is all about. They need the cheap labor so that the different companies across the state of Indiana can access this slave labor that they're bringing in through these temporary protected status.
But
housing, SNAP, all the above.
Yes, go to Walmart, folks, and just, if you look at their carts,
Oh, go to Sam's. I've been to Sam's, and I'm like, they have 2 carts, and I'm like,
they're way better than what we can afford.
exactly.
And we're the ones paying for it.
Exactly.
And Ken, you mentioned the IEDC, and considering we're talking about that shady organization, which
Right.
is supposed to be our Commerce Department, aren't we supposed to have a forensic audit? Whatever happened to that? Whatever happened to the transparency?
Well, let me share something with you. Okay, so Braun was wanting to virtue signal to the actual state of Indiana that he was there to help support and expose about where our tax dollars were going through the IEDC. He got to a certain point when you get to find out exactly who was facilitating. These were actual employees of the IEDC. And my friend, Barbara Basilio, has now since filed suit against the IEDC over these same arguments. So these men they were called the Three Kings, is the vernacular, what they're calling them. But these 3 men took advantage of a very good organization for their own personal gain. So all of this is about to come out in this audit. Braun has stopped it, but if he goes one step further, he will be able to identify by name and these different LLCs that were established under the Secretary of State's office. $180 million is unaccounted for.
It's a lot of taxpayer
That's
money.
a lot of money that I and you are having. We're funding these, and in fact, we can't even ask questions. Think about what the legislature has intentionally done. They have blocked the private citizen to get access to public access records to find out exactly what's going on.
And those are your taxpayer dollars, folks. Folks, my problem with the IEDC and government in general is I don't like government picking winners and losers. I don't like the government coming in saying, well, we don't like your egg farm, so we're going to subsidize someone else to go in business right next to you because we don't like your business.
What about no bid contracts? We've
It's
proven
exactly the
that
same.
is non-governmental. You have to go through procurement to make sure that you get the best opportunity for the taxpayer. They are negating that. We know down
Well,
in
and it's public knowledge. It was in the Indianapolis Star that the IEDC was awarding non-bid contracts to their cronies.
Yeah.
That were
And-
connected to companies that were getting no-bid contracts.
And speaking of that board, you mentioned, Cheryl, about Republicans in bad standing because a Republican had a Democratic deputy prosecutor in your county. And, doesn't that technically make if I were to think about this, Ken and Cheryl, wouldn't that make Braun a Republican in bad standing since he nominated and hired the former Democratic House Speaker?
You can go up
and
the chain of any of them, and you can call them a Republican in bad standing.
What?
They pick and choose who they want to kick out.
Yeah,
Speaking of-
if we had that kind of model.
That's the whole bottom line. We don't have any transparency, and they shut you down like they did us.
Right.
Yeah.
And hence is why we are part of starting with the Indiana
Right.
Freedom Caucus. We said, we got to make a change in the state of Indiana.
Absolutely.
And
And that is the crux of it.
Yeah.
What is the best vehicle to get these people and hold them accountable? And unfortunately, it's going to be a long game from the grassroots to take back our party.
Amen.
And to take back our state and our legislature.
But there cannot be apathy from the voters. They have got to get out and vote, because we know that typically in the primaries, conservatives do not take the initial step to get out there and vote.
So, folks, I implore you, no matter who you vote for, the primary election in Indiana is May 5th. Please, please, please show up to vote. Please, please, please show up to vote.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And close the primary, because
Amen.
we know
Close the primary.
Right, and people don't understand how that works. Republicans typically don't cross over to vote for the radical Democrats, but the Democrats will cross over and pull a Republican ballot to vote for the weakest Republican that they can be manipulated, hence getting people like Vanetta Becker. I do, and that's what got me thrown out of that's what got me thrown out of the party, because I was critical of that individual.
Well, because she votes what?
71% with the Democrats.
Someone may be listening. I'm like, I agree with all of this. What can I do? You can go vote, and it's ultra important that you vote, because you have to vote in 2 Republican primaries consecutively to be able to run for office yourself without having to get your county chair, who may or may not let you run. In my case, they said, no way, we don't want a chicken farmer running for anything. So I was kicked off. But if you vote in 2 consecutive Republican primaries, they cannot take you off. Now, what they will do, and what Ken talked about, is this Republican in bad standing thing, where they're trying to say, oh, you didn't toe the party line. But in my opinion, and I talked about this before we went on the show today, folks, that's something out of North Korea. That's something out of Cuba. That's something out of Russia. Abraham Lincoln said, elections are up to the people. Let them decide. It should not be up to the party bigwigs to decide who our candidates are. It should be up to the people.
The rules are different than the law, and the Republican Party now is weaponizing it. I want to share this, too, because I have put my name on the ballot to run for a state delegate. So they've contested that, saying, well, you're a Republican in bad standing. They've gone one step further. Now they're trying to prosecute me for illegal...
For trying to do your civic duty.
Exactly, and they have violated my constitutional rights. We know for a fact that our county clerk, this is a fact, when you're running on the ballot, you cannot go into the polling places, you cannot help count ballots. We have hundreds of people that have witnessed her doing that, but yet that's not a crime, and they're trying to prosecute me because of the fact I put my name on the ballot.
And isn't her, since she's a clerk, shouldn't she be under the purview of the Secretary of State's office?
And
the Chief
Diego-
Elections Officer?
Diego Morales knows this. He knows exactly what she's done. He will not address it. Diego Morales will not address this problem.
So, folks, we're out of time on this segment, but when we come back, I want to keep talking about these party rules, and there's a little tidbit here. It's very important. Abraham Lincoln lived in Indiana for a while. Had he stayed in Indiana and ran for office where his cabin was located, he could not have met the 2 primary rule to run for president had he remained a Hoosier. This is John Rust. We will be right back. Stay tuned. Good afternoon again, folks. This is John Rust on the radio, the John Rust Show on Freedom 95, broadcasting at 9:50 a.m. and 95.9 FM on your radio dial. So, folks, we're talking about Indiana election law, and we're talking about big issues in Indiana that are related to that. And one of the massive issues coming forward right now and how it relates to Indiana elections is because BlackRock is involved. BlackRock, this private equity fund, has just announced they are buying AES, which is the local Indianapolis power supplier. This is a massive, I believe, $32 billion takeover, and it will absolutely lead to massive increases in already increasing electricity prices for Hoosiers. So, folks, as a reminder, Indiana electricity charges for all Hoosiers on average went up 17% in 2025. In 2024, they went up 9%. Why is that? These data centers are coming in and using lots and lots of electricity, and unfortunately, because of the Green New Deal and a lot of Republicans buying into the Green New Deal grift of all these solar panels and windmills, which, that's nice, I guess, unless you're a bird and you hit it.
That's why I call them the bird killers.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
I always say, look at the facts. Kentuckians, on average, pay 12 cents per kilowatt for electricity. Hoosiers pay 17 cents per kilowatt for electricity. Why is Kentucky cheaper? They burn predominantly coal for their electricity. And so people say, well, John, that's so outdated and that's coal, that's bad.
False.
There's nothing wrong with carbon. There's nothing wrong with CO2. Every tree on earth needs CO2. You as a human being breathe out 2 pounds of CO2 every day. 2 pounds. And another issue that's coming up, Ken, I don't know where you're at on this carbon sequestration thing that they're working on in the Indiana.
In Terre Haute specifically, too.
So, folks, what they're doing is they're talking about burying the carbon because it's bad. If you follow that through to its illogical consequence, that means they have to bury every human being, too. They want to bury us all because we are all producing CO2 as well every time we breathe.
And without that CO2 that we breathe, our trees will fail. Our trees need us.
And so, folks, this is a ruby red state. And someone says, well, what's your plan to get electricity prices down? I think the answer clearly is to follow free market capitalism. It is not free market capitalism to have BlackRock buy your utilities. You know what those salaries are going to do for the people working at AES after BlackRock does it? Right now, I believe the CEO of AES gets $13 million a year. Did you know that? For a utility that you have no choice but to use if you want electricity. That's not the market. That's not the free market.
It's a monopoly.
That's a monopoly. It's a state-sanctioned monopoly, and that's why our leaders have an absolute say on what electricity prices are. So our leaders should be lowering the cost of electricity, and the only way I think you're going to get that is by producing more electricity through nuclear and through new coal-powered power plants.
But think about how we got here. People have to understand this. It goes directly back to the legislature. I can give you examples. This has been going on since 2013 when the Senate Enrolled Act 560 was first started. There's at least 10 different laws that were created which the legislature shifted their obligation and responsibility to the IURC, the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission. They gave them the sole power to cut this deal in regards to AES and BlackRock. And the legislators now are like shocked that these things are happening when they were the true facilitators to get us to this point. Now, down in Evansville, in our area, we have CenterPoint. It's the exact same thing. So they're looking at partnering with these other private equity groups to be able to take control. Why isn't the legislature right now looking at co-ops where we, the people, would actually own the utilities?
Well, and folks, the backstory on all this and why our utilities, it is a monopoly. You have no choice if you build a house for what electricity you're going to get unless you run out there and run your own windmill up and hope the wind blows. If the wind doesn't blow, you're out of luck.
Yeah.
Or if the sun doesn't.
In southern Indiana, President Trump did stop 2 of our coal-producing facilities
from being shut down. Thank goodness.
So that's a good thing. But right. I've always said we have no competition. That's another reason. We have one of the highest utility bills in southern, I think, with CenterPoint. And we're at the very bottom of the state, and it's atrocious. I mean, I've told this story before on our podcast. I have a friend that's a vet, and he is put in housing that the VA sends him to, which is not great. But he has bills for his electric that are $800, $900, even $1,000.
Yeah.
He can't even pay them because he doesn't have that kind of income. He's a Vietnam vet.
Again, it's not right, as you pointed out, when the General Assembly is purposely facilitating monopolies and allowing BlackRock to let them do that. Why act so shocked when literally this is what they wanted?
And we can go across the bridge in where we live and be in Kentucky, and we can also get one of their utilities to come over. It's insane that they're not letting that happen. But my state senator, Jim Toms, has a bill that they won't even bring out of committee for 2 years now, that he has a proposal that the IURC, they start replacing them with elected officials. And not all at one time, because these people are just appointed
by the governor.
By the governor. Yeah. So His proposal was to replace them one at a time. So 1 year, one election, you vote for one of them. The next time, you vote for another one until you replace all of them with an elected official.
I actually really like that idea. And, but of course they won't let this do that. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, they've taken away the ability to elect certain offices before.
It is patently obvious. The legislature has chosen to defer the responsibility to a commission.
They'd rather vote on the tenderloin sandwich and be in our state sandwich.
Correct.
Dereliction of duty is what it's called.
Total dereliction of duty. And this is why I would agree with you guys on this, Cheryl and Ken. I do think it's a good idea. We should be able to elect these guys. If we're able to have a say in that and who regulates the utilities, maybe because we have an insurance commissioner, some states elect an insurance commissioner, that we could be able to have a say in that. That's my view of it.
But
Well said.
And the root cause is Indiana has went hook, line, and sinker into the Green New Deal. Witness all the windmills, witness all the solar farms. My family, we have a chicken farm near Brooke, Indiana, in Newton County. We have diesel generators on that farm. You would be shocked to know this. We get asked by the utility to run our generators to take our farms off the grid. But my gosh, that sounds like something you'd say about Cuba or North Korea, where there's not plentiful electricity. It's my opinion we should have plentiful electricity. We just had these massive snowstorms in Indiana over the past few weeks. You all remember I got 17 inches of snow near where I lived in Seymour.
Where we got.
And it was cold for about 2.5 weeks straight. And what the utilities did is they issued all these warnings that beware, we're going to have rolling brownouts and rolling blackouts.
How many
You know
people
why
got
we
that?
didn't have to do that? It's only because the power went out in large swaths of Kentucky and Tennessee due to the storm that they had extra electricity to send up here, and because of the coal plants that President Trump kept open in Indiana. Had those been shut down, folks, we would have had blackouts in Indiana. And I don't think anyone's talking about that. It's the old boys club. I was disappointed to see that Governor Braun appointed a Democrat
I know.
to the
Exactly.
IURC. What's up with that?
And one of them that was considered was Christina Hale, John Gregg's running mate from 2016.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
And that Democrat's from our area.
That's
Because
right.
folks, they pick and choose, who that applies to, just like they're doing with Ken, just like they did with me, and just like they will do with you. Please, 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 again, I will keep saying this, vote in your May 5th primary. May 5th, absolutely. Please make a reminder in your phone, no matter what you're doing. Please go in and vote.
Yes.
Yes.
Please go.
If you
It's an
don't
imperative.
vote, that's a vote for the Democrats.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's
You've
right.
got to get out and vote.
And the secondary thing is, when you go out to vote, don't vote for the recognizable name that's already an elected official. If you're voting for delegates for your party, vote for the other names. These are the real grassroots people who are trying to get their voice from these people living the regular everyday lives. They've got that perspective, and that's what needs to be reinforced in our legislature.
Well, and that's why I
Yes.
believe in term limits. If I ever run for anything, I want 2 terms and I'm out. Or take me to a river somewhere and throw me in. I just don't believe in, like Mitch McConnell. I think he was a sincerely good senator back in 1984 when he first ran. But my gosh, that's over 40 years ago now.
Yeah.
And he has become this just total swamp rat.
Is he still alive, though? Is
McConnell.
You're talking about Mitch McConnell.
Yeah,
Mitch
we
McConnell
can end up
barely
burning this
alive.
spot.
No,
Well,
he's
Ken-
animated by Disney. At
Ken
this
and
point.
Ken and I were, but this
And-
is what's
and-
got us fired up.
And you just hit
because-
the nail on the head. I don't believe the Republican Party should be the country club party.
No.
It should be the party of the plumber. It should be the party of the lawnmower repairman, the egg farmer. It should be the party of someone who had to work all their lives.
That's exactly right.
Hey, our website is indianafreedomcaucus.org.
IndianaFreedomCaucus.org, folks. Please, please, please look that up.
We want them to join us. We want to be all over the state. We have somebody in the very northern part that's getting ready to open a
Do you have a
chapter.
Facebook group?
Excellent.
Yes, under the same name.
Okay.
We have an X account under the same name.
And an event coming up, I'd
Candidate forum.
try to have the candidates in that area come to a meeting where the people can actually ask questions.
But
Yes.
we're
And
about
folks,
America
show up
first,
even
though.
if you're 91 years old. I want to reiterate something. If you're not, my mom's 91, and she still works 6:30 to 4:30 every day.
That's wonderful.
And that keeps her going. But that doesn't, I don't think she should be in the Senate, though. After 40 years. That's the key.
It seems sometimes that the best of government is nothing but compromise, but the worst is tyranny.
Yeah,
Well
absolutely.
said.
Absolutely.
So, folks, this is John Rust. We will come right back to the John Rust Show on Freedom 95. Stay tuned. Welcome back, folks. This is John Rust on the Radio on Freedom 95, 950 AM and 95.9 FM on your radio dial. We're talking about Indiana election law, and Brian Pease from the Indiana Freedom Caucus is talking about a specific rule, and it exposes the hypocrisy of how the establishment uses rules to pick and choose who can actually run for any election.
The legislature set this up. The way it reads, this is from the Indiana Code, Title 3, Article 8, Chapter 2, and this is in Section 7. It says, this is about candidates' party affiliation. If the candidate cast a nonpartisan ballot at an election held at the most recent primary election in which the candidate voted, a certification by the county chairman under Clause B is required. And that's where you have to ask for permission. Mother, may I? Because it's the same legislature that wrote this also made the school board nonpartisan.
Mm-hmm.
And if you vote in that, technically, okay, legalistically, technically, through a back door, they could disqualify anybody that they don't like, which we've seen.
And folks, the numbers on this will shock you. It is well over 81% of Hoosiers are today banned from running for political office of their chosen party because of this rule. Because a lot of people like me just didn't vote in many primaries. You know, I always voted in the fall elections. I sent money in, went to Lincoln Day dinners. But the moment I said, oh, I want to run, they're like, no, you're not going to do that. And so, folks, just be mindful of that, and that's why we are begging you and imploring you to please absolutely vote in the May 5th election.
John, I was guilty probably of that too, if I thought there was no competition in the primary.
Well, there was no choice.
You have no choice, so you didn't think you were going to have your hands slapped and get kicked out of this party that you supported your whole life.
Yeah.
Okay, so because you didn't vote in the primary.
Do a lot of this stuff.
Well, and
Just
I
like
think a
you
lot of
said,
people were like me. You know,
you're
I was busy
Very
being an egg farmer.
Correct.
And I just assumed the Republican Party was ruby red, and I just assumed I would have
Right.
conservative candidates.
Well, keep in mind, Eric
Sadly,
Holcomb,
I was mistaken.
Keep in mind, Eric Holcomb was the governor, which should have been a big red flag.
Well, and that's
But,
that's
yeah.
what
The wine
that's
of the
you know
West.
that's what got me into politics was when Holcomb shut down our state over the flu.
Yeah, and our General Assembly did.
You know, when
nothing.
they closed churches, when they closed schools, but allowed liquor stores to remain
Yeah,
open.
yes.
That was wrong.
And when he tried to put a Class B misdemeanor on anybody who didn't wear a mask, thank God our sheriffs all stood up and
Right.
said, no, you can't do this because it's unconstitutional. I think it was all county sheriffs from what I was able to tell. And why wasn't he impeached? Oh, yeah, because they were busy enabling him. Both parties. They were
Those-
cheering him on.
The swamp of Indianapolis.
Yes,
Well, a
their
lot of money-
their actions show who they truly are
Well,
in a crisis.
And that money was being slathered around like there was no tomorrow. And that's what led to the inflation we're facing today. So, folks, when you go to Walmart, what I've noticed now is Coke and Pepsi, especially Pepsi at my Walmart in Seymour, they've went to 8-packs rather than 12-packs. They have this big banner. The price is the same as what it was a year ago, but you're only getting 8 cans versus 12.
Right.
Now, in their defense, it's because the dollar is worth less and less today. The news the other day where, you know, an average McDonald's value meal, I believe, is around $10 on average now. You know, back in the 1990s, it was $4 for a, quarter pounder with cheese value meal. Everything's getting more expensive, and the Indiana politicians are making it more expensive. And look at what's happening on tolls. This just came out by the Indiana Capital Chronicle by an article by Tom Davies. He says the Indiana application details have finally been released for I-70 tolls. It will be proposed that you have to pay $15.60 to drive a car across Indiana Interstate 70 from Muncie to Terre Haute. That's $15.60. I did the math. It's 10 cents a mile. So if they toll 65 from Chicago to Louisville, you're going to be paying over $30. If you're going from New Albany to Lafayette to go to a Purdue game,
I see a lot of
$25
back-
each way. So you're going to be paying $50 in tolls just to go to a ball game.
Oh, and don't forget Riverlink at the end, where if you're going down to Louisville, because if you're from Bargersville, if you're from Franklin, you're from Columbus or Nashville, and you're going to go down to Louisville because there's some show or something like that, get ready to pay some tolls.
That's right.
Because they've got it for you.
Well, Braun is trying to push this through, and what they're trying to sugarcoat this is saying, well, it's only going to be for 10 years because we're going to use that money to
That's
pay
not how it goes.
for 6 lanes. They're going to add a lane to I-70 across. But folks, I live in the real world. Again, I'm a chicken farmer. I know how truck drivers think and what they will do. If you toll I-70, I guarantee you truck drivers will just switch down to I-64, drive across southern Indiana to Cincinnati, and then go up 71 north of there.
That's what I was going to say, John. I was thinking there's going to be a lot of back road driving.
There's
And
going to be
who-
back road driving,
That's
and so then they will say, well, since everyone's going on I-64, we have to toll 64
Right.
now.
Yeah.
And then they'll say, well, we got to do 69. They're already talking about I-69. So eventually, and unfortunately, the Indiana Republican legislature just voted with that quote-unquote property tax relief, which was minuscule.
It was not relief.
And
Token.
I think $3, I think it was, relief.
But
$3.
they put in a poison pill and a Trojan horse that authorized tolls for every mile of Indiana interstates. Just, and then they sit there and slap us on the back and say, we're doing this for you.
We have the fourth highest
yeah.
gas tax in the country.
And speaking of the gas tax, how come when I go to visit my folks in Tennessee, why is it that I pay lower gas prices in Kentucky than Indiana?
Yeah, and Kentucky has a Democrat governor.
That's right, Andy Beshear, who's
bad.
Yeah, he is bad.
You would also have more funds if they'd stop squandering it on these public-private money laundering schemes that no one wants. No one was asked. The grassroots people don't want a lot of these programs and things that they are squandering our money on.
Well, and it's just going to be a massive issue. But back on the tolls, I told you what the car rates will be. It'll be $25 to drive from New Albany to Lafayette if that's implemented on I-65, which I guarantee you it will be. So a semi to go from Terre Haute to Muncie will be $84.24. Folks, there's no such thing as a free lunch. That means you as a consumer, for any item being shipped across the state line, will just have that added on to the cost. There is no such thing as a free lunch. If you can't make the truck drivers pay for everything.
And then the prices for everything goes up because it's being transported.
Right.
In Evansville, they decided to implement a wheel tax, which nobody wanted because of the fact that the property tax cap was at 3%. They were finding they couldn't balance the budget because we have an incompetent mayor who happens to be a Democrat. And in any event, they tried to subsidize. So what did they do? They wanted to tax us through a wheel tax, which they should have the ability to say, no, we don't want to do that. But again, they didn't listen to us.
Well, while we go to the meetings and then they talk about it and then they table it, and then when we don't have a full room at a meeting
Is when they pass
is
it.
when they pass it.
They sneak it through.
Yeah.
They'll
And-
If I'm not
Also,
mistaken, that was part of the property tax reform, is that encouraged local communities to implement wheel taxes.
That is correct.
But
Of course,
They
additionally,
blamed
They
it on,
weaponized
they
it.
blamed it on the federal money that they
So there are
didn't
two
get.
Trojan
But-
horses. That's tolls and wheel taxes.
And of course-
And so, folks, on the tolls, a very good friend of mine is named Gary Bradley. He drove over, I think, 3 million miles for my family, delivering eggs all across the United States. And I had him in here on the radio show, and we were talking about this. And he pointed out when New Jersey implemented very high tolls in New Jersey, the projected revenue never, ever came in because the drivers just avoided the state. They went on 2-lane highways. If you're a truck driver and you're facing an $86 toll to drive from Muncie to Terre Haute, $86, that's a lot of money.
It is.
They're going to say, well, screw it, I will go ahead and drive the 2-lane highway. And so how many more Hoosiers will be hurt, unfortunately probably killed, on more accidents on 2-lane highways because these trucks will go to our local highways now if we make these tolls so exorbitant?
And
Well,
when you
I'd
look-
like to know where all the gasoline tax money is going. Indiana tax revenue
not going
from
to
the
the roads.
from the gasoline tax is at a record high. And so I just drove across Ohio a couple weeks ago. I was amazed at how nice their roads were. And then which has a much lower, no tolls.
And they have a rhino governor.
And I crossed immediately into Muncie, and the roads were just awful.
And it's not just Muncie, it's everywhere.
Well, this is from Angela Moore on Twitter. She says, Indiana is a strong conservative state. You know, we are a Republican state. However, the majority in our state government is not. You know, thus high gas taxes, toll roads coming, AI data centers chosen over residents and farmland, socialist programs, and the inability to shrink government, lower taxes, and repair our roads. So, Ken, before we close, what is your podcast information again?
Well, let me introduce us, okay?
Okay.
Hey, Ken Colbert here.
Cheryl Badiger-Smith here.
And we are Republicans in bad standing. That is the name of the show. And then we have people over the state that are giving us information about exposing about what's happening within our government, both on the Democrat and Republican side.
What platforms can we find your podcast at?
We're on X. We're on Telegram. We're on Rumble. Rumble is where we do the video content, obviously. We also have a YouTube channel.
Okay.
It's under K. Colbert Report is the platform we're using.
Okay.
If I may. Thank you so much for having all of us here. On behalf of Justin and myself, we co-host the Neurologic podcast. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Podbean. We also have Apple Podcasts that you can check us out on. We're starting a YouTube channel for our podcast, so please check us out. We cover different topics, but mostly politics and things like that. So please, if you can, check it out. We would really appreciate it.
Brian Pease.
IFC, Indiana Freedom Caucus. We are primarily, our headquarters are in Evansville, Indiana, the southwestern corner, but we have interest from a variety of different individuals throughout the state in approximately, 13 to 15 different counties.
Yes.
Who eventually, we hope, not just that, but more, will open county chapters of this organization.
Wonderful.
And the information is spreading to promote grassroots real conservative.
Common sense conservatism.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
And transparency.
Well, that's the big thing, is complete transparency in government, and they're accountable to us. Whether they believe it or not, that's what we have to believe in.
So I'm not promoting any of my shows today, folks. I'm just going to say, please go out and buy some eggs. Easter is coming up, and I will give you a cooking tip, folks. Buy eggs now. Yeah. Eggs that are extremely fresh are extremely difficult to peel. I know that goes against the grain of what people are told, but older eggs are actually much easier to peel. So for your Easter eggs, go out and buy some eggs now. Sit them in the back of the refrigerator. They'll be just fine, and they will boil and peel much easier when you do the wonderful egg coloring with your grandchildren and children. So, folks, I'm going to close with my father's favorite Bible verse, Psalm 118, verse 24. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Folks, I will see you all again next week on the radio.